Good day. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. It's winter in Calgary now. I despise winter. I really do. Never learned to like it. I just can't make myself do it. At least there's no mosquitoes out. We got lots to cover today, guys. And for those of you tuning in live right now, good to see a bunch of you checking in. Peterson, Mr. Stanley, Jake Paradoxy, Sean. Use the comment scroll, guys. Chat with each other. Send questions my way, comments. I'll try and get them to the guest. If not, at least I see them. It helps me keep the tempo of the show going. Just don't start scrapping with each other in the comment scroll. I mean, come on. It discourages people from tuning in and distracts me when I keep looking over and wondering what you guys are saying to each other. That's what X is for. Use that area to scream at each other. I do all the time. Come on out there. Cory B. Morgan. I'm not going to Blue Sky. Don't worry about that. So, yes, lots today. We've got, as a guest, Ontario MPP Goldie Ghamari. She's been pretty outspoken about the anti-Semitism and crazy marches and stuff that's been going on this last year and change now. It doesn't seem to be slowing down. If anything, maybe the numbers are getting smaller, but the people are getting more extreme. So she's going to chat with us a bit about that and some of the things. Her family's originally from Iran, and she's pretty familiar with some of the challenges of Middle Eastern politics, I guess you could say. All right, well, let's talk about some more domestic challenges and get on to what's got me wound up today. And yes, I want to talk about Trump derangement syndrome. And it's a real thing, and it doesn't just cause harm to the mental health of some people, it's harming the country. I mean, some people have become so obsessed with their hatred of President-elect Donald Trump, they've lost all sense of reason. A perfect example in Canada is veteran journalist Andrew Coyne. I see one of the commenters mentioned him as soon as Trump derangement syndrome came up. I mean, while Coyne's never made a secret of his dislike of Trump, he's typically well composed online and in public. But since the last election, he's become outright unhinged. His posts on social media at first drew chuckles from people, but now they've reached a point where people are seriously starting to get concerned about his state of mind. I mean, people don't joke about making wellness checks on Coyne any longer. As it becomes evident he's really actually suffering a mental health breakdown over this. Coyne's far from alone. I mean, on either side of the border, we see this. You only need to tune in and watch the Coven of Harridans hosting The View for any given 10 minutes to see how bad Trump derangement syndrome can be. The show used to cover a variety of topics. Now it's just a daily rerun of hyperventilating over Trump's win and hyperbolic predictions of what he'll do while he's in office. The extent of the derangement's evident in the bags under their eyes. His lack of sleep has overpowered their Botox injections and facelifts. I mean, if Trump's literally keeping you awake at night, you have a problem. Pundits and politicians, they've got to take a controlled reaction to Trump's presidency and start looking at how they're going to interact with it. He's going to be in whether you like it or not. Blindly opposing Trump on all issues while insulting the man's only going to harm Canada's already fragile economy further. National political commentators and leftist politicians, they've been aghast that Premier Daniel Smith's going to be traveling to Washington for Trump's inauguration in January. Are they complete fools? Have they no clue whatsoever about diplomacy and trade? Let's put the numbers out there. Alberta exports about $80 billion a year in products to the USA. Canada as a country exports $438 billion annually south of the border, and we import $277 billion every year. We're very dependent on maintaining a solid relationship. It's our largest trading partner, and it's sheer idiocy to be antagonizing the incoming president. Trump was elected on a protectionist mandate, and let's face it, he has a vindictive streak. It doesn't take much goading to push him over the edge and have him bring even heavier tariffs on trade goods from, within Canada. I mean, when we got headlines painting him as the second coming of Hitler, he's not going to feel much sympathy when he brings those tariffs in. The Trudeau Liberals are swirling the drain in public support, and they haven't managed to chip away at Poilievre's popularity, so they've been pivoting towards attacking Trump in a desperate bid to draw support from themselves. This tactic won't change the political fortunes of the Liberal Party, but it will harm Canada. Trudeau doesn't have a good track record of putting the needs of the nation ahead of his own, unfortunately. Diplomacy is a delicate art. Leaders don't want to be too deferential to each other, but they also must maintain a level of respect for each other, even if they don't like each other. Smith's proactive approach to working with the new administration will surely benefit Alberta. The benefits of her approach, though, might be wiped right out if Trudeau continues to take shots at Trump, while Canada's subservient legacy media pundits cheer Justin on. You don't have to like the orange man. I'm not terribly fond of him. I really do wish the Republicans could have chosen somebody a little more rational to represent them. But in the end, though, it's their choice, and Trump is who we must deal with. Rather than having a self-destructive 4-year temper tantrum over Trump's presidency, we should be in discussion with how we can pragmatically deal with it. Step one to such a plan would be to quit attacking the guy. If you're locked in a room with a rattlesnake, yeah, trying to pet it probably isn't a good idea, but provoking it's even a worse idea. Figure out how to live with it until you can both leave the room. Don't let yourself be overwhelmed by Trump derangement syndrome, and don't let your friends succumb to it either. The condition's contagious, and it'll harm us more than COVID ever did if it keeps spreading. You survived the last 4-year term of Trump, and you're going to survive this one. It's on you, though, if you want to come out of this term with a semblance of mental stability. Don't be like poor Andrew Coyne. He's living in a miserable place of his own creation, and it's not doing anybody any favors. Watch out for Trump derangement syndrome, guys. It's a real thing, and it's scary. All right, well, that's what I've been ranting about. Let's see what else we got going on in the news with our news editor, Dave Naylor. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
It's going well, man. Are you grumpy since Monday when the snow flew?
Oh, yeah, when it gets cold out, I get crabby. I am not geared for cold weather. I despise it.
No, I know. Hey, what happens to your bees in the winter?
I winterize the hive. They all cluster up, and that's the nice thing with beekeeping. I don't have to do a hard thing until spring, assuming they survive it. They vibrate, actually, to create heat, and they eat the honey.
Do you talk to them?
Oh, yes, the bee whispering.
Bee whispering is something I found on Facebook. I guess starting in the Celtic days and all the way up through the 17th and 18th century, beekeepers used to go out and talk to them and tell them life's problems and what's been going on in their life. In theory, because when somebody close to you died and you saw a bee, that was supposed to be good luck. I don't know whether it was carrying their soul or what. But yeah, for hundreds of years, people went and talked to their bees. I had good conversations with them.
Well, I maintain my bees. I don't have conversations with them. Usually if I spend too much time, they just sting the hell out of me. So I'm not sure if our relationship's close enough for any in-depth
They really don't want to hear you.
Wildlife-wise, though, I noticed for a change that your family is, I mean, it's always my game cameras, but there's been a weasel in the field coming on the social media pages from your daughter. Look at that picture. Yeah. That's great. Pop goes the weasel there.
And that was taken from my daughter's front window, believe it or not, down in near Vulcan. Yeah, great shot. I don't know if I've ever seen a weasel in the wild.
Yeah, but they're neat looking. And they get that little black tail tip often in the snow. That's the only thing you'll see. But I guess he's white before the snow falls.
They're not very nice creatures either. They're all like rip your throat out.
But that screwy cat of ours still managed to kill 2 of those back in British. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, either way, it was a cool shot.
So yeah, it was a cool shot by Nicole. So yeah, thanks. So we got breaking news on the site right now. Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, as expected, has been named the head of AIMCO, the Alberta government's pension people, controlling $140 billion. He's actually not going to run it day to day, Cory. He's going to be the chairman of the board, and he says he's going to do it for free to help, pay back, his adopted home for the last 40-some years. We've got a new City Hall columnist started on Monday, Mike Thomas. You've talked to him many times on your show. He's a housing expert, so he's gonna cast an eye down at City Hall, and he's got a column today on the police force in Calgary, asking for $23 million for a new police range. And of course, I think we all want our police officers trained well enough to fire and potentially save lives. We've also got a great video, another one of these outstanding Polyev pre-election campaign videos where he's talking about the carbon tax election. And he's got Trudeau basically saying exactly the same thing. So for once, they agree on something. And we've unearthed the video of Chief Boissonnault, Chief Randy, or whatever he wants to call himself these days. And he's in the video pretending he's a full-blooded Cree Indian. And I don't even think he could spell Cree, never even claimed to be one.
It's so just bizarre to watch.
And I was going to mention Trudeau is actually doing his job today, and he'll be in question period for a few minutes. So our Jen Hodgson will be watching that, and she'll have the video clips, which will no doubt contain great hilarity. The report into the tragic death of the baby gorilla at the Calgary Zoo is out today, and it turns out it was human error. The zookeeper pressed the wrong button, and it lowered it moved a mechanical gate and crushed the baby. So you can imagine how bad the zookeeper feels on that one.
Yes.
And we've got another video up of a Sky News panel down in Australia. And they get it, Cory. They get it more than a lot of people in Canada do about how Trudeau sucks, basically, and how he's got to go and how he's destructed Canada. So, and just a reminder for the viewers in Alberta, you're going to get an alarm at 1:55 as the province tests the emergency alert system. So don't panic when it goes off. It is just a test, as they say.
Well, good. It's a good reminder because, they certainly like to use that emergency system improperly on occasion.
Well, yeah, I think it was last year. It came out like 17 straight times.
Yeah, it drove everybody bananas. I guess that's why you got to test it, but get it right.
Well, I'd rather go through a test of the year to make sure they get it right than
True enough.
not have it right at all.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'll let you get back to curating that pile of stories and getting them up to the site. Lots going on.
Lots going on. That's great.
Right on. Thanks. And yes, and as Dave mentioned, Sky News, yeah, they're not afraid to rip into Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. But you want to know why? It's because they're not dependent on subsidies from the federal government to make their news. That's why with the legacy media outlets, they don't speak up on the complete terrible behavior of our federal government because they fear losing their subsidies. We don't have that kind of fear because we don't take subsidies, but we do rely on you guys. We rely on subscriptions, and you guys have been fantastic. That's why we're expanding. That's why Mike Thomas is going to be covering Calgary City Hall, that crazy City Hall. We got reporters across the country. We got columnists across the country. It's thanks to you guys who have subscribed. So I really like to express my appreciation and nag you. Hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, get on there, westernstandard.news/subscription. This is how we keep independent media going. This is how we hold the government's feet to the fire. $9.99 a month, $100 for a year. Gets you full access to all this stuff and keeps us rolling so we can keep doing this. So again, if you have subscribed, thank you. If you haven't yet, come on, get on with it. Send a gift to your crazy liberal uncle. Like I said, I just think if you really want to drive them bananas for the Christmas dinner, send them a subscription to the Western Standard. And who knows, maybe a little sense will sink in there. It's possible. It's possible. People change. People learn. Sometimes. Some of them are lost causes, like our Prime Minister. And yes, so I mean, I'll just, before I get to our guest, and I see her in the lobby, I'm looking forward to this. Just one more thing that I'm going to ramble about a little later. When we're talking about the Prime Minister, we're talking about subsidies, we're talking about our dollars. We've got Northvolt. That's one of the companies, one of the many companies. I mean, Trudeau's committed, I believe, up to $50 billion tax dollars to battery manufacturing as he has his obsession with electric vehicles. That's just not happening. People don't want them. People aren't buying them. And the companies are going broke left, right, and center. Well, this Northvolt is a battery company in Quebec. We're supposed to build a plant in Quebec. They didn't build it. They're a Swedish-based company. They got, I believe, $2.7 billion already in subsidies. And now it looks like they're going bankrupt. They're broke. They didn't even start the groundwork. So didn't even, I mean, the excuse for subsidies, and there's never a good one, is that it'll create jobs. Well, they didn't even create jobs. They just flushed billions down the toilet. But it gets worse than that, because apparently the Canada Pension Plan dumped a bunch of money into that as well. And that gets really even more concerning. That's when you start seeing ideological motivations driving the investment patterns rather than common sense, rather than getting a return on the investment. These are the discussions Alberta's going to be having, actually. If we're talking about Stephen Harper taking over the investment corporation, I would hope he's going to ensure that, the goal of AIMCO is just to get a return, not to subsidize Alberta businesses or Canadian businesses or come to any political ends, just get a return on the dollars. We can see right now with this, this is just the beginning of the end, I think, with the battery subsidies, with the disaster we've seen, with the money being thrown at it. It's only going to get worse as these companies start going down. Okay, so as I said, we've got our guest on deck there, MPP Goldie Ghamari. For Alberta listeners, that's Member Provincial Parliament. It's similar to MLAs, we call them out here. I know some people don't follow that, wonder what the heck that's about. And she's out in Carleton, and she's been very outspoken on social media, and there's not nearly enough people who've been outspoken on that, on just some of the insanity that's going on our streets, the hate marches, the statements, and now, I mean, just the ludicrous event that apparently might be coming to Mississauga. So let's bring Ms. Ghamari in and see what's going on. Hello, thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, Cory. Thanks for having me. Can you hear me?
I do indeed. No, you're coming in loud and clear. I really appreciate it. Are you guys enjoying better weather out there than we are? We're in full-on winter now.
Oh, really? Yeah, you guys always get winter a little bit before we do. It's cold and it's rainy, but it hasn't reached like 0 degrees yet. So
okay. Well, I mean, just to kind of tie that in together, one of the things that kind of stops some of the absurdity with protests is bad weather. The real, lighthearted ones won't come out. But we're just it's been a year and some since October 7th and the horrific attack in Israel. We've seen protests coming up. I mean, what I'm seeing out of it is a smaller number of people, but they're getting more and more extreme as things progress right now. And nobody seems to be really standing up to them still. And it's getting really worrisome. Like if I could ask, as I said, you've not been afraid to speak up on social media, and I really appreciate that. Because few elected officials really want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. But, what's going on in Mississauga? They're going to be celebrating the death of a terrorist?
it's shocking that anyone in Canada even thinks it's appropriate to organize something like this. I mean, Hamas is a terrorist organization. It's listed as a terrorist entity in Canada. But you have certain bad actors who have very close connections to the Islamic regime in Iran. And you know, I'm Iranian myself, and I've been very outspoken against the Islamic regime. You know, my family actually escaped the Islamic regime and came to Canada in 1986 when I was a year old to get away from that brutal Islamofascist dictatorship. And so for now, for you know, me and people like me to see people who support the Islamic regime in Canada and spreading that message and spreading that narrative, it's very frightening. It's not something that I ever want to see in Canada. It's not an ideology that has any appropriate place in Western civilization. Um, and yet you're seeing these bad actors who are constantly going out there, not just being very anti-Semitic, but also directly targeting and attacking Jewish people. They're also targeting Iranians. So the organizer of this event, he's not only attacked Jewish people, he's also attacked Iranians who speak out against the Islamic regime. And he's not even Iranian himself. So, you know, we do have a very big problem with radicalism in Canada. And I think part of the reason is because they are pushing the boundaries on freedom of speech, freedom of association, and they're really taking advantage of our society where, you know, they're saying, well, this behavior might not necessarily be illegal, so we're going to engage in it even though they know it's wrong. So my understanding is that this event in Mississauga has now been canceled, but it was only canceled because people like myself and a few other politicians, not that many unfortunately, were speaking out against it and saying this is inappropriate. So I think that the mayor of Mississauga canceled this now because of the pressure she received. But it's really shocking because last week she actually compared Yahya Sinwar, who is a bloodthirsty war criminal terrorist, she compared him to Nelson Mandela, which is shocking and it's disgusting and it's vile. And so I'm seeing this rise in not just anti-Semitism, but in this radical Islamofascist narrative that's slowly creeping in, and no one's really speaking out about it. You know, people, I guess they assume that, well, maybe if we just ignore it, it's going to go away, but it's not going to go away because all of this is being funded by the Islamic regime in Iran, and there are direct ties to that.
Well, I mean, what's the motivation of some of these progressive politicians? I just don't see their interest in this or where they're coming from. With Carolyn Parrish, the mayor of Mississauga, yes, comparing Sinwar to Nelson Mandela, what an insult to a a real individual. Or likewise, Heather McPherson, a member of Parliament from Edmonton, one of Alberta's great MPs, along with Boissonnault. But I mean, she compared her watermelon pin with a poppy. For folks not familiar with it, you know, the watermelon is become a symbol for the pro-Hamas groups out there, and I guess you could say pro-Palestine. Not everybody's necessarily supporting Hamas, but where do they get the gall to compare these different symbols, and rub people's faces and just why are these progressive Canadian-born people supporting these regimes? I don't get it. I really don't.
I don't get it either. I mean, I think some of it is definitely rooted in anti-Semitism. Some people are just, you know, anti-Semitic in general. If you look at some of Carolyn Parrish's, the mayor of Mississauga, is like her tweets from years ago, she makes very anti-Semitic, anti-Israel statements. So it's always been there. And I think with the past year, a lot of people have become more emboldened to speak out in a very bad way. And they're really pushing the limits on freedom of speech. A lot of what they're saying is really bordering on hate speech. And I think it's up to us as Canadians, it's imperative for us to call it out and to make sure that this behavior is not normalized. So that's something, you know, that I've been very active about, because as someone who literally fled the most brutal Islamofascist dictatorship in the world, the Islamic regime occupying Iran, I can see the signs of radicalism. I can see where the narrative that's being said in English is very similar to the narrative that's being pushed by the Islamic regime. And the Islamic regime spends upwards of $1 billion on its soft war, right? Like on pushing this false narrative out there through through paid agents, through actors, through its cyber trolls online, and also through propaganda networks like Al Jazeera and the Quds News Network and Press TV, which unfortunately are being broadcast and promoted in Canada. I also think DEI plays a big role in this. You have a certain group of people who are trying to push this narrative of Israel being the colonizers and the Palestinians being like the oppressed, and that which is total nonsense. It's total BS in that sense. And also Israel is, I actually went to Israel about a month ago. I was there for 2 weeks, and Israel is not an apartheid state. In fact, the vast majority of Jewish people are not even white. So for them to kind of, they're basically co-opting this DEI colonizer versus colonized narrative to promote their own agenda. And I think a lot of people on the left just end up being useful idiots, and they just fall for it because they think, oh, like this is something we relate to, because these are the same people who also constantly attack Canada. And they're the ones who disrespect our veterans. They're the ones who ignore Remembrance Day. They're the ones who try to basically they're anarchists, right? They're just anti-imperial leftists, and so they've found this sort of niche where they can unite with these Islamists and sort of promote their anti-West narrative together.
And I don't think maybe enough people understand or have a look at the Islamist regime in Iran. I mean, they've been in power since, I believe, 1979. And
Yeah.
the civilized world has recognized them as a brutal, terrible, theocratic dictatorship. We talk about foreign interference, we talk about China, we talk about India, but not enough people are talking about this regime. I mean, it is constantly caught with its tentacles going out to different countries, trying to inspire hate and trying to fund these kinds of protests and actions like that. I mean, our government was so reticent.
And Cory, also assassinate people. I don't know if you saw the news article that came out a couple of days. I think it was the National or Global News. They basically said that Canadian intelligence officials foiled a plot from the Islamic regime in Iran because the plot was essentially to try and assassinate Erwin Kotler. And
Yes.
Canadian officials foiled that. So the Islamic regime has its tentacles everywhere, and not enough people pay attention to it. When someone like me, when I speak out about this, especially in Canada, a lot of Canadians go, well, why are you so focused on Iran? Like, you're a Canadian politician. And so I always try to explain to them, the people of Iran fighting to overthrow the Islamic regime, it's not just about them. Like, this also has an impact on Western civilization. And we can see the effects with the way that they're influencing people, they're indoctrinating people, they have paid agents here, they have attempted assassination attempts on people, and also there's foreign interference, and CSIS has even spoken about how the Islamic regime engages in foreign interference in Canada.
Yeah, and that boldness is frightening. And for people who might be younger, not as politically familiar, Erwin Kotler is a statesman now. He was a politician. He's always been very outspoken on these issues. And yes, he's quite Jewish. It's no coincidence that puts a target on him as well. So, I mean, we got upset enough when it appears that India may have been dealing with looking to assassinate people within Canada, but we certainly aren't hearing the outrage and indignance over this issue that broke recently, with it being discovered that Iran planned to assassinate a Canadian senior individual. But I mean, again, this Liberal government's taken a soft touch with a lot of these things, like Samadown, or if I'm mispronouncing that, but it finally got declared as a terrorist organization. I mean, they had been by other countries long before. The government also didn't want to declare the Iranian Revolutionary Guard or other such as
Islamic. It's called the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up with all of the groups, but the Liberals, again, really did not want to condemn them. And why? Yeah. I just don't understand the hang-up.
I don't know either. I mean, I don't know if it's money. I don't know if it's votes. I don't know what it is. I mean, I know the Iranian diaspora, including myself, we basically fought for 6 years to convince the federal government to put the Islamic regime on the Canadian terror list. And they only did it right before a by-election happening in Toronto. And I think they did it because, they were hoping to maybe get some votes out of it. But, the writing is on the wall with them. They have taken a very soft stance on terrorism, and that includes the Islamic regime. And so I think, even though, they've now listed the Islamic regime as a terrorist entity. It's too little, too late. I can tell you that the Iranian diaspora in Canada, the vast majority of them, will not be voting Liberal. They're going to be voting for Pierre Poilievre, because Pierre and the federal Conservatives are the only party who's taken a strong stance against the Islamic regime and against terrorism, and people remember that.
Yeah, and I've been seeing that at some of the counter protests to a lot of the pro-Hamas protests that have been going on. We're kind of watching international things unfolding on our streets, but it's not just Star of Davids out there or Canadian flags flying. We're seeing Iranian, former Iranian nationals as well on the anti-Hamas side. I mean, people are forgetting that it's not just Jews that are pushing back against this sort of thing. It's concerned Iranians who they've seen how bad it can get, and they really, they're speaking up, which they're not getting enough attention for that.
You're absolutely right. In fact, when the brutal genocidal massacre happened on October 7, about a year ago, there's a hashtag, Iranians Stand With Israel, that started trending that very same day. And that hashtag actually originated inside of Iran, because Iranians recognize and understand who the enemy is. Iranians recognize and understand who the threat is in the Middle East, and it's the Islamic regime. They're the real terrorists. So right away, Iranians stood with their Jewish brothers and sisters, including myself. And even though there's been a lot of anti-Semitism going on, unfortunately, but I'm very proud of the Iranian diaspora and even Iranians inside of Iran who are literally risking their lives by speaking out against the Islamic regime and recognizing that the Islamic regime is the real terrorist. And it's not just the Iranian diaspora in Canada who's been supportive of the Israeli community. There's also many people in the Hindu community, many people in various communities who've been affected by terrorism as well, who are joining and siding with their Jewish brothers and sisters. And I think that unity and that allyship is so important, because ultimately, for those of us who are from the Middle East, we recognize and we understand who the real terrorists are, and it's not Israel.
So in these last few minutes, I'll throw the hardest question at you. What though? I mean, the things are going to be going on in the Middle East for years and years to come. Unfortunately, we hope they'll get better, and we hope things, can improve. But domestically in Canada, what should our politicians and our people be doing? What can we do to at least try to tamp down this unrest and this division we've got going on around here over the whole issue?
So I think we definitely need to take a stronger stance against anti-Semitism, and we need to recognize that anti-Semitism is not just a Jewish problem; it's a Canadian problem. It's behavior and ideology that has no place in Canada. I think we also need to take a good hard look at some of the people who are constantly promoting this narrative. I also think that politicians need to take a stronger stance when it comes to cracking down on these pro-Hamas protests and not giving people the confidence to think that they can get away with this behavior, right? And we need to call out terrorist language when we see it. Like for example, they've been saying for over a year, oh, Intifada, it just means uprising. But for someone like me from the Middle East, I know what Intifada means. Intifada basically means like suicide bombs. It means radicalization. And, we're seeing that. Like, we're seeing direct targeted harassment against Jewish people, against Jewish communities, against Jewish schools, against Jewish synagogues. And we need to unite as Canadians and recognize that enough is enough. I mean, everyone has different political perspectives and opinions, and that's fine. You're welcome to, share those perspectives. But if you're crossing that line and going into hate speech or going into attacking your fellow Canadians, I think that's inappropriate, and I think that needs to be really, really curbed.
Absolutely. I mean, we always got to be careful with restrictions on free speech, but when you're calling for death to people or targeting particular ethnic groups, I think most, again, civilized Canadians realize that's where you got to draw a line and intervene. I mean, just for the sake of humanity. So I before I let you go, then where can people, as I said, I really appreciate you being an outspoken voice on this. Where can people find you and see what you've been communicating?
So I'm mostly active on Twitter, so you can just find me. My account is G Ghamari, just the first letter of my first name and my entire last name. You can find me there. I'm pretty active. I'm pretty outspoken. I tweet a lot about Iran. I tweet a lot about Canada. I tweet a lot about anti-Semitism. and other things as well. So that would be the best place to find me.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate you joining us today and for speaking up on these issues. Hope you can stay safe out there, and hopefully perhaps the next time we talk, we'll be talking about how a lot of things have been resolved and we're in a better place.
I hope so too, Cory. Thanks so much for having me on. Great to be here.
Great. Thank you. All right. So yes, that was Goldie Ghamari, and yes, a good voice, a voice of experience, somebody speaking up. Because again, this cowardice on the part of so many politicians to at least call it out. When we're talking about free speech, it's very important, absolutely. And I do believe in, as much as I loathe seeing them, if people want to go out there with Palestinian flags and protest, so be it. But when you're getting to the point of targeting particular communities, I mean, do the cross comparison. If it was a known, black community, and we had a bunch of people putting on KKK hoods and targeting that community, intimidating those people, would you accept that? Absolutely not. It's the same when they're targeting Jewish communities. Okay, we got breaking news. We're seeing some of that coming up in the discussion scroll, and I see Dave sitting in the lobby there. It sounds like, Dave, the Randys have stepped out of cabinet?
Yeah, we're not sure if it's one or both of them, but just as I left your studio, we got news that he has resigned from cabinet. Believe it or not, the PMO says resigned to be able to clear his name. So we'll see how that investigation goes. But as of a few minutes ago, Boissonnault out of cabinet, and they're currently in question period, screaming and yelling at each other.
I can imagine. Well, thank you for the update, and we'll keep an eye on the Randys to see where they head next.
Thanks, Cory.
Thanks, Dave. So again, that reminder, these things are breaking live in the newsroom. Keep an eye on it. The Western Standard. We see that link has been going up there. The story is already up there on westernstandard.news. We're not just, a site with has opinion and so on. It's a news site. It's like your old newspaper. Subscribe and you can get in there and see these things as they break. So some of the people saying, resigning isn't enough. He should resign as an MP. I agree. I'm surprised, though, it took this long even to resign from cabinet. And for people maybe who haven't been following this, I mean, this stuff's been going on with Randy Boissonnault for quite some time. It stinks to high heaven. He's had companies that have been getting government contracts. This is when it was really first starting to erupt some months ago, which he hadn't. When you become a member of parliament, particularly, or an MLA, and you're in government, you've got to put your stuff in a blind trust or get yourself out of your companies, things like that, to avoid the conflict of interest. Well, he didn't do that. And then it sounds like that, his companies were getting government contracts. And then he was saying, well, yeah, but I had nothing to do with it. And then communications surfaced, showing communications with a Randy who's actually active in the company. And that's where his denial, well, that was a different Randy. That's why everybody keeps mocking the Randys, because that was his excuse. He was saying it was some other Randy. Apparently there's a whole bunch of Randys out there. And then it sounds like his company is fraudulently selling medical supplies that weren't delivered. They're getting sued. And then it turns out there was a mailbox that his company, or one of his companies, was sharing with a woman who, the mailing address was shared with a woman who was busted multiple times for cocaine sales. So yeah, Cocaine Randy started trending. And then the latest, it turns out, and I'm surprised it took this long to break, he's been part of the Indigenous caucus. The Liberals had a whole page with a number of members of parliament where they said, these are our Indigenous members of parliament. And Randy was prominent among them. And then it turns out he has absolutely no Indigenous background whatsoever. None. He's as white as snow. And he was saying, oh, my adopted parents were Indigenous. They were Cree. And people looked into that and no, they weren't either. What was it? BS. He's a liar. That's the bottom line. He lied. He made it up. But he was saying, no, I don't know why the Liberals stuck me on that list. Oh, just a coincidence. They just randomly pick people up and throw them on their Indigenous list of people. And then you see, yes, I'm going to confidently call him a liar. I'm not afraid of lawsuits, because the videos are now surfacing of him presenting himself, even talking about his Cree name of Walking BS or whatever the heck it was at different functions. The man's a pathological liar. So yeah, it's no wonder he fit in with the Liberal cabinet so well. So now he's out of cabinet. He's still in caucus. He's still a member of parliament. Now, and I don't give Trudeau a lot of credit for a lot of things. Trudeau can't kick somebody out of their seat. That he can't do, and he shouldn't. A prime minister should not have the power to remove somebody as an elected official. But he sure can kick him out of his caucus. As Dave said, here comes the damage control. We're separating him from cabinet to try and clear his name. Right? He's not going to get his name clear. The bottom line is they're still keeping him in caucus, and they're just going to ride it out for the year, I guess, to try, hope that this calms down. I doubt it will. As Dave said, they're screaming at each other in the House of Commons, but that's nothing new, right? what a bizarre thing. But see, part of where Trudeau's cornered too, when you have a government and you set up a cabinet, you want to try and have representation, across the country. It's just good politics, right? You want to make sure that every province has at least a cabinet minister or a few, depending on the size of the province or what you got. The problem Trudeau has with the West is Saskatchewan doesn't have any Liberal members of Parliament. Alberta only has 2. One of whom is George Chahal, who, if people might remember, he's known as the porch pirate, because video cameras in the last election campaign found him stealing mail from somebody else's mailbox when he was campaigning. Apparently, it was the literature from his opposing candidate, and he pulled that out of the mailbox and replaced it with his own. Pretty criminal. Of course, Liberals never seem to get charged or convicted of things, but the video's there, so go ahead and sue me if you want, George. I call it theft. We have some pretty good video evidence of such. So Trudeau is stuck between Chief BS and George the Porch Pirate Chahal for cabinet ministers from Saskatchewan or Alberta. That's all he's got. And it leaves him in a pretty difficult spot. So I got a feeling we're not going to see any cabinet representation in the prairie provinces until the next government comes into place. But either way, for the time being, that moving train wreck of Boissonnault has now left cabinet. They'll probably, again, just bury him on the backbench, let him collect his money until the next election. Even if they want to keep him in, he's not going to win the seat in Edmonton again. There's no way. He's way too tainted, way too crazy, way too clearly full of crap. But yeah, 2 out of 2 Liberal MPs in Alberta both are pretty much almost criminals. I won't say fully. They haven't been convicted in a court of law, but they're certainly getting convicted in the court of public opinion. And it's just brutal. So, paradoxically saying they're only get caught in Alberta. Well, I don't know. Yeah, unfortunately, just to be fair, I think if there were any as corrupted and messy as Boissonnault in any other province, I mean, legacy media is weak, but they still, when they smell blood in the water, they're going to go after them. And they haven't been caught yet over in the other provinces. Unfortunately, Alberta seems to have gotten the most ridiculous and insane of the Liberal MPs. I mean, look at some of this stuff going on, though. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to go into the bad government, the things that are going on. Unfortunately, we got a glass studio. I'll kind of describe it. When you see Dave checking in, you can see the background, and his back's to me, and I see the TVs on in the newsroom, and I can see Justin Trudeau at question period up there doing his indignant ranting and yelling at everybody. He's taking a strong stance. We're living in such a crazy, crazy, bizarre time, aren't we? How can that man even get up? His public support is the lowest in Liberal history, I think. He's going to be obliterated. And now, it's just one disaster after another with these Randys, with all of this other stuff. Justin Trudeau gave a lecture. You see, he's so stuck on his bizarre woke world. He actually was talking about saying Canadians should be thinking about climate change over thinking about feeding their children. Check it out. These are real quotes from Trudeau. This was him coming from a summit down in, I think it was Peru. What are you talking about, you nutcase? Feeding our kids comes first. You see, this is the disconnected world that Justin lives in. This is the bizarre, silver spoon, trust fund baby, ski instructor groper that he is. He has no idea what real people have to deal with. He's never had to worry about paying rent. And look, lots of people are born into wealth. I don't fault them for that. By all means, hey, you won the luck of the draw. Good on you. Have fun. But it does leave them with a disconnect on what people in the real world have to deal with. So Justin's never had to worry about paying rent. He's probably never bought his own groceries. He's talking about feeding the family over climate change. I mean, again, he's got a personal chef. They feed his kids. His army of nannies have raised his kids. He has no clue. So he seems to think that we can, Justin said we should just put our children secondary because we want to support his carbon tax and his climate change agenda. He's nuts. He really hasn't any idea. That's why he's still in power. Because any politician who's even a little bit self-aware would have by now said, you know what, you can always give those resignation speeches. I think I've done my time. I've made my change. I'm going to step aside so I can spend more time with my family. We've been going through a divorce and my children deserve better. So I'm going to step back and let somebody else carry on the brilliant Liberal agenda. He could do that. And a smart politician would, but he's not a smart politician. He's a nutcase. And he doesn't know. So he's going to drag this out right to the end. It says so much about his caucus. The wimps, the spineless, gormless, unprincipled wimps that make up the Liberal caucus who won't pull him down. They're going to swirl the drain with him because they're afraid to stand up. There's those rumors, oh, well, we've signed an anonymous letter asking him to resign. Well, that's worked out well, hasn't it, guys? Well, ride your way to the unemployment line. And they know, but if you cared about the country, if you cared, you would try to slam the brakes on this, not for the sake of your party, not for the sake of your parliamentary seat, which is probably not a chance of winning again, but just do one thing finally for the sake of Canada and get that lunatic out of power. Can you please do that? But they won't. And I mean, these numbers that are coming in, this is just recently. So the federal bureaucracy has grown 73% under Trudeau. 73%. This is due to a decade of economic idiocy, of a false economy that's been built on hiring people with government jobs that we don't need to hire for. So we're just pouring money into this bloated, useless, lazy, incompetent civil service. And they are all of those things, guys. They're whining about having to go to work 2 days a week. They went on strike last year. And have you done anything with a federal service, civil servant, and gotten good service, competent service? No, they're idiots. They're overpaid union hacks, and they need to be flushed down the toilet, just like the other things that get flushed down the toilet. But Trudeau won't do that because he needed to buy an economic base for himself, but it's catching up. He also poured immigration, unchecked mass immigration in for years. Same thing, it adds to Canada's economic bottom line, but it costs us. You see, he can keep saying, look, the GDP's gotten bigger. Yes, it has. Yes, the pie has gotten bigger, but you've added 5 million more people to have to try and share it. So you're getting a smaller piece. And it really shows with the GDP per capita. Not enough people, I've talked about that on this show, but people have to watch that. Canada's GDP per capita, your gross domestic product per capita. So your share of wealth annually per year of the Canadian economy is about 53,000 American dollars. In the United States, right next to us. And we got to remember, 15, 16 years ago, these were almost the same. We were next to each other. Now, fast forward, the American GDP per capita is around $82,000 American. And Canada's, again, is 53. Look at that gap. Meanwhile, you can buy a house cheaper in the States. You can buy food cheaper in the States, all your consumer products. We are in desperate, desperate condition, which again, this train wreck has to be stopped. Trudeau's been ideologically obsessed with climate change. He thought this is going to be his hill to die on. He thought people will finally come around and say that the carbon tax is a good idea. They haven't. They won't. It's hurting them. They keep telling you it's not hurting you. We know it's hurting us. That's why your support's going in the toilet. We can tell our bills at the end of the month. Again, Justin doesn't understand that. He's never had to pay bills. He has an accountant take care of it for him. He doesn't know what people are struggling with in this country. And his bloody caucus will not tear him out of there. So as I mentioned earlier, Northvolt, one of the electric battery companies that lunatic Trudeau has poured billions and billions in subsidies into. Poured the money, stolen it from successful businesses and hardworking people in taxes, and then giving it to the unsuccessful and incompetent, which is what this is. No jobs created, Swedish company, no building built. It looks like they're going to go broke. And that's just one of them. That was only $2.9 billion in subsidies or something like that. His whole battery plan is $50 billion. $50 billion. And you know what? It's going to all go down the toilet. It will. Well, let's watch those companies just keep falling. No jobs created. We fall behind. He's put a ban on the sale of conventional cars and trucks. It's going to supposedly zero. You know, not a single internal combustion engine vehicle is going to exist by 2035. Every possible economist, automotive expert is saying this is impossible. This cannot happen. This will not happen. But it is stunting the market. We can't build the infrastructure fast enough. We don't have the vehicles are way too expensive. We don't have the electrical grid to sustain it. It's not going to happen, but he will bankrupt us trying. Think of how expensive it is going to be to get around by then when we aren't making the cars we need, the cars we want, the cars we can afford. Instead, we've messed things up. Dealerships are changing their priorities. The private auto manufacturers are already backing off despite the subsidies. We're not making these things because people aren't buying them. But Trudeau won't back off. Trudeau's a madman. Trudeau is one of the most narcissistic people Canada has ever seen. So yeah, I'm going to make my plea. I talk to conservative politicians all the time. I rarely talk to the liberal ones. I doubt too many of them watch this show. But if any of them are, guys, do one good thing for Canada in your career, just once, and take that fool out of the Prime Minister's chair. Pull him out of there. He is harming the nation. He's taking it down the toilet. Look at the disruptions, the instability, the protests, the addiction epidemic, the housing crisis, the GDP per capita. Jacqueline, the commenter, saying, didn't Freeland say she wants all the Canadian savings? I don't know. We don't have any savings left. We're going broke. Guys, please, I'm begging you. Stand up and do one good thing. Pull that fool out of the Prime Minister's chair. Okay, I'll leave on that note, though. Tune into our other shows, guys. The Pipeline will break down some more issues that'll be on this evening later on. And, of course, Nigel has a fantastic show that comes on regularly. And, yeah, keep watching for Mike with those columns of Calgary City Hall. It's great to see somebody focusing on that City Hall that's been ignored too much. It's crazy down there. And, yeah, take out a subscription for the Standard. Thank you all for tuning in today, guys. We will see you all again next week at this time with a fresh new guest, and we'll break it all down again. Thanks. See you then.